The desert had a way of testing a man. For 3 days, I'd been riding through the San Simon Valley, the sun turning my hat brim into a griddle and my throat into sandpaper. When I reached the dry arroyo, I saw buzzards circling above something half buried in the dust. It wasn't a carcass. It was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 17, her dark hair tangled with blood and sand. Her dress was torn, her arm wrapped in a strip of rawhide. A shallow wound streaked crimson down her shoulder. When I poured the last of my canteen over her lips, she coughed, blinked, and met my eyes. "Why?" she whispered in accented English. "Why give me your water?" "Because you'd die otherwise," I said simply. She studied me for a long moment. Then, faintly, "My name is Taji. You have given me life." And before I could ask her what she meant, she murmured something in Apache, a chant or a prayer, and pressed my hand to her heart. When she woke later in my camp, she was stronger, though still wary. I tried to ask what had happened, but she only said, "Whites came. Took our horses. I ran. They shot me." I offered her jerky and coffee. She refused the jerky but took the coffee, grimacing at the taste. Then, she said something that made me nearly drop the tin cup. "You are my husband now." I thought she was joking. "Beg your pardon. In my people's law," she said solemnly, "the one who gives water to a dying Apache woman becomes her husband. You saved me." The spirits saw. I laughed, thinking it a mistake of words. "Ma'am, I think you're confused." But she stood, weak but steady, and placed her palm on my chest. "You cannot refuse what the spirits have joined. My tribe will know." That night, while I tried to make sense of it, she sat by the fire, humming a low chant. There was pride in her posture, pain in her eyes, and something I couldn't name, flickering like the firelight between us. 2 days later, riders appeared on the horizon, Apache scouts. They surrounded our camp in silence, their bows drawn. Taji stood tall before them and spoke quickly in her language. One of them, a broad man with hawk feather braids, turned to me and said, "You gave her water. You are bound." They brought us to their camp in the canyons, a place hidden between red rocks and juniper. The air was thick with wood smoke and drumming. The old shaman listened to Taji's tale and nodded gravely. He took a bowl of water, held it toward the fire, and said, "Water is life. To share it is to share one's spirit. You are husband and wife before the eyes of Usen, the Great Spirit." I should have protested, but when Taji looked at me, her eyes were soft and shining. She had lost her family, her people scattered, her world burning around her. Something in me, the soldier, the wanderer, the lonely man, couldn't turn away. That night, they painted our faces with ash and river clay. And beneath the desert stars, I realized the ceremony wasn't about possession, it was about gratitude, survival, and honor. For a while, I stayed among them. I learned their ways, how to read the wind, how to move silent through sagebrush, how to listen to stories told by embers. Taji healed, and the laughter returned to her voice. We spoke little of the strange law that bound us, but the bond itself deepened, steady as the desert horizon. When the U.S. cavalry came riding through months later, demanding that all Apaches return to the reservation, Taji turned to me and said quietly, "Go with them if you must. But you will always carry the desert in you now. And my heart." I rode away with the dawn. At the ridge, I looked back once. She stood by the fire, wind in her hair, a single feather trailing down her braid, watching until I was gone. Sometimes, when the night is quiet, I still hear her voice in the wind. And I remember. All I did was give her water. But the desert made it something sacred. 10 years passed before I found myself back in Arizona. The war had ended, the territories carved into neat maps that never matched the land. I'd worked as a scout, a ranch hand, and finally a drifter again, a man without a place, carrying memories heavier than any pack. I hadn't meant to return. My horse had gone lame outside Fort Bowie, and the desert was calling, the same whispering wind, the same smell of creosote after rain. I followed it, almost without thought, until the cliffs of Taji's canyon rose against the dusk. It looked empty. The old lodges were gone, just rings of stones and ashes. Only the wind moved between the red walls. Then, by a stream that still ran faintly with spring melt, I saw her. Taji, older now, her hair streaked with silver, but her eyes, still the color of storm clouds before rain. She was kneeling by the water, filling a clay jar. When she looked up, she didn't startle, didn't even seem surprised. "I knew you would return," she said quietly. I dismounted, my throat too tight for words. I wasn't sure I'd ever find this place again. "You did," she said simply. "Because it never left you." We sat by the fire as twilight deepened, speaking of all that had changed. Her people scattered across the reservation, her brothers gone to other tribes, her life now one of quiet tending to the land. She told me she still offered water to the stream each dawn, a prayer for those who wander. Finally, I asked what had long haunted me. Did that law, the one that bound us, mean we were truly husband and wife? She smiled, slow and knowing. "Law is only words, but spirit is truth. You gave me life. I carried you in mine. That is enough." The stars came out, fierce and clear. I thought of the years I'd spent chasing belonging and realized I'd left it behind in that canyon long ago. When dawn touched the cliffs with gold, I filled my canteen from the same stream that had once saved her. She placed her hand over mine, just as she had the first time. "Now I give you water," she said softly. "So the circle is whole." I rode away again, but this time, I didn't feel the ache of leaving. The desert stretched endless before me, but it no longer felt empty. Because somewhere in the wind, I heard her voice, steady, eternal, reminding me that what we give, freely and with heart, always returns.